Hey guys, my name is Aneen Amir. Today I'll be showing you how you can give that Joker look to your images. I'm talking about pulling the colors from the movie still and applying the same palette onto our image. So let's jump into it and talk more about it. Alrighty, before I get started, I want to give a big shout out to Liliaco, who's actually the model behind this shot. She's a phenomenal and a fun person to work with. So I'll leave her Instagram down in the description. Make sure to follow her. Now, the way I edit my shots is that I start off with a base layer. And what that base layer does is that it gives me a direction and how I will be editing my shot moving forward when I bring it to Photoshop. And when it comes to bringing this image to Photoshop after creating this base layer, to fine tune and really match this shot with a reference shot. So as we move forward, I'll explain a bit more about my process. So in terms of base layer, what I usually do is that I start off with your good old basic correction. Once that's completed, I move on to hue, saturation, and luminance, mainly focusing on saturation and hue. And the last part would be split toning. Now, what I usually do is that I leave hue at the end. I complete split toning, which is technically the last part. And once that's completed, I come back to hue part of this shot. So step number one is to, of course, start with basic correction. I think I'm gonna bump the exposure just a bit. I think that's good. I don't want to blow out the details and the highlight. I like having contrast in my image, so that's what I'm gonna do. Just gonna bump the contrast. Highlights, I'm just gonna bring it down a bit, make her skin a little bit more smooth because the highlights were blowing out. Shadows, I think I'm gonna keep the way it is. I don't want to move around too much. I think this is good. Whites, I can bump that up a bit as well. Blacks, I'm just gonna leave the way they are. I'm not gonna do much when it comes to blacks. Once that is once that's completed, your basic corrections, I'm gonna go down to your hue, saturation, luminance. So what I like to do is mainly get rid of most colors except her skin tone, and I'm just trying to get the image ready for the main body. So main body of edit, which is again going to be in Photoshop. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to get rid of most colors. Yellow, of course, it affects your skin tone, but not too much. We can still have the ability to make some changes and bring it back to its natural state, as well as get rid of greens as well. We're going to skip hue for now. We're going to jump into split toning. And what we're trying to do when it comes to split toning is take those colors and trying to head to the direction of our reference image, which consists of greens and a bit more cyans. So that's what we're going to be doing here. Even if you mess this part up, not a problem. Your second layer, which is going to be in Photoshop, you can correct most of the work. So don't worry if you mess this part up. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to bump it up. I think 130-ish looks good. I can bump the saturation up a bit as well. Now notice how our skin is starting to look really, really pale and yellow. Don't sweat it. We're gonna come back to our hue, and that's where we will be fixing it. Shadows, we can bump it up as well. Let's see. I think this looks solid. I can bump the hue up a bit. I think this looks good. Where we're not. Yep, this looks solid. Now we're gonna come back to hue, and that is where we're just gonna bring it down. The orange, which is mainly your skin, and a little bit of yellows. And that's basically it. We've basically completed our base layer. Now, notice how the colors in the back are starting to create this Joker-esque look from the movie. Yes, it's completely off. Yes, it lacks greens. But don't worry, when we move on to Photoshop and work with our neutrals, it's gonna be phenomenal. So that's basically it. What we're gonna do, we're gonna move this image to Photoshop, and you can do that directly from Lightroom. So you can right click on it, edit in Adobe Photoshop 2020. That's the version that is installed on my computer. Whatever version is installed on your computer, that's what it will show. And that's about it when it comes to Lightroom. Alrighty, so before I begin, make sure your image is in 16-bit rather than in 8. When you import your image directly from Lightroom to Photoshop, it's going to be in 16-bit, so you don't have to worry about a thing. But if you import your image directly into Photoshop, it's going to be in 8 for sure. So to change that, go into Image Mode and to 16-bit. Now, the difference between 16-bit and 8-bit is that with 16-bit, you're working with about 16,000 plus tonal values, versus when you work with 8-bit, it's only 256 values. So if you're editing an image that is an 8-bit image, you are going to come across issues like color banding. So just make sure you're working with the 16 rather than 8. Now, the next step is the skin retouching process. I've already went ahead and quickly did the dodging and burning part as well as blemish removal. You can see that her skin, the lighting on her skin is balanced. Any blemishes on her skin has already been removed, and it looks nice and clean. Now, once the skin retouching process is completed, we can move on to our next step, which is working with our background and our subject. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a new group called background, and I'm going to create another group called subject. Now, what we're trying to do is that we're trying to break the image down into multiple different parts, background being one of the part and subject being one of the parts. Now, within subject, there's different elements such as Lily's skin, her scarf, her shirt, and maybe her eyes, her nose, her lips, her hair. These are different elements that you can work with. But for now, we're only going to be sticking with her scarf, maybe her eyes, her skin tone, and that's basically about it. So let's start off with the background first because I think that's pretty quick to do so. What I'm going to do, I'm going to select selective color layer, and I'm going to start off with neutrals. Now remember, neutrals is super powerful, so just be careful when using it. Of course, if you don't like it, you can remove the layer and retry it again. But again, just be careful when using neutrals. What I'm going to do, I'm going to just bump up the yellows. Just right here. I'm going to bump up the magentas as well. And I'm going to bump up these sides as well. And now you can start to see that our colors they look very, very similar to our reference image. Just right here. And then I'm going to hit Control I, Command I, and I'm going to remove Lily from the subject by painting our background. Just make sure your foreground color is white when doing so. And that's basically it. Now, once the background is completed, we can move on to our next part, which is our subject. So when it comes to subject, one of the first things that I want to focus on is her skin tone. Skin tone does take a little bit of time, so just take it easy. It's going to take a little bit of a trial and error before you get the right set of skin tone. What I'm going to do, I'm going to start off with the reds. So skin tone usually consists of about 2 sets of colors, which is your reds and your yellows. It's never blue or green or anything else, unless until another element has been implemented onto your subject's face. So some sort of light or some sort of gel when taking the shot. But in this setting, it was when I took the shot, it was at a natural setting. So it's probably it consists of reds and yellows. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to just bump it up just a bit. I think this looks good. I'm going to bump magentas as well. Think about here. This looks solid. I'm going to bump the yellows as well. And I think this looks about 21 looks good. You can already tell there's a little bit of changes, not too much, just a little. Now I can go into my yellows. That's where the things get a bit more fun. I'm gonna bring my signs down. Also keep my magentas down a bit as well. And when it comes to yellows, that's where it's gonna completely change. So when I bump it up, you can tell that the colors are starting to show. Can bump it up just a bit more. Maybe bump the signs back. And then blacks, I'm gonna bring those down to give more depth to her face. I think that's about it when it comes to reds and yellows. Whites, which people tend to miss. I'm gonna bump down those whites, bump down the cyan, sorry, magentas as well, and bump the yellows all the way up. Now you can see that glow, that yellow glow, that golden glow on her skin, and that is because we used the white portion of selective color. It's really, really powerful and really, really solid. So I utilize it as much as possible. Now, the same thing, we're going to hit Control or Command I, and then select our brush and just going to brush it. I think my flow is 12%. Okay. I'm going to bump it up in her hand, and that's basically it. Now, the other element that I want to focus on is her eyes. Eyes do take a lot of time. It's possibly one of the most complex part when it comes to color grading, but I'll show you a quick little trick. I'll just bump it up all the way up here. Command and Control I. Select the curves layer and then bump it all the way up. And then what I'm going to do, I'm going to bring my flow to about 12%, 24%. This looks good. And then basically I'm just going to just a bit. I'm just gonna brush this like that, her iris, I believe. I think that's what it's called, and that's basically it. I think it's a bit too much, so what I can do, I can just bring the opacity down a bit, and I think this looks a bit better. I can even bring down a little bit more so it looks a bit more natural, but I think this looks really, really good. So her eyes are completed, her skin tone's completed, and the last part would be her scarf and her shirt. So to do that, we're going to do the same thing, go into selective color, go into our neutrals, and then bump up those yellows. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to replicate the waistcoat that in the movie that Joker's wearing, and then try bringing those set of colors into her scarf and her shirt. Control and Command I, and just gonna bump the flow up, and kind of same thing. I think it's yellow. It's not like a mango color, and that's what I want to go for. So what I can do, I can bring those signs up a bit, magenta up, sorry, and then bring my blacks down, and that would kind of do it. I'm just gonna remove from her skin because it's spilled, and that's basically it. We have basically completed our subject, and that's it when it comes to the entire editing process. We are officially done. Well, that's about it. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to my channel. I'll be making tons more videos like this. Again, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.